Hello again, Gary Stearman. Time for another edition of Prophecy in the News. Today's guest, author and lecturer L.A. Marzulli. Stay tuned. Well, it's always a pleasure to have L.A. Marzulli in studio with us because he's got a mind that is constantly in motion. He's thinking, he's interpreting Scripture, and he's looking at modern prophetic fulfillments in a way that I don't think anybody else is today. L.A. Marzulli, welcome to Prophecy in the News.
Great to be here again, Gary. Thanks for having me on.
And let's just go for it because we live in exciting times. There are a lot of people watching today who have a lot of questions. In fact, let me say a lot of anxieties because the things that are happening in Europe, the Middle East, in America have got people upset. And let's just talk about the biblical assessment of what's going on in today's world.
Well, in my opinion, when we go to Matthew 24 and we look at the list of events to look for, wars, rumors of wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, and troublesome times. And this begs the question, are we in a period of time where we're seeing that list manifesting on the planet? My answer, the short answer to that is yes. This is happening. And one of the key phrases Jesus uses there, earthquakes in diverse places. And what's amazing about that, when that was penned almost 2,000 years ago, there was absolutely no way to measure an earthquake. If you lived in, let's say, Galilee, and an earthquake happened in Japan, you would not know about it for perhaps months, maybe never, unless, of course, a sailing vessel pulled up and said, hey, there was an earthquake a year and a half ago. And now, with the iPhones and the BlackBerries and everything's wired together on the internet, I get pings all day long. Everything over 5 point, I get pings. So I can track literally earthquakes in diverse places. We just did a study, posted up on my blog, lamarzulli.wordpress.com, but we did a little study of the rise of earthquakes in the last 10, 12 years. And when you plot the earthquakes on a graph, specifically the 6.0, 7.0, but 9.0, like we had in Fukushima, it's going like this. We're definitely seeing an increase, not only in frequency, but in severity.
You know, L.A., a few years ago, I was doing a study on earthquakes, and I noticed something very interesting. There is a steadily increasing graph, and you can see these anywhere. Earthquakes over 5.0 magnitude. You can just watch the graph climb over the years, except, and this is fascinating, for the year 1948. And when Israel became a state, there were no earthquakes that year. Isn't that amazing?
Very interesting.
Now, this tells me that the things that are happening in the world today are linked to the nation Israel, and we see this in so many ways. We see UFO waves that occur when key events transpire in Israel, telling me that the prince of the power of the air is a little bit disturbed. Satan is called that in the Bible, and he rallies his troops. He does not want things to succeed in modern Israel. He basically, I think, is standing against the development of modern Israel, in spite of all the prophecy that stands for modern Israel. So we see a lot of today's prophecies tied to Israel, including earthquakes.
And maybe this is a slight deviation from that. Hopefully it won't be. But we see also the rise of anti-Semitism coupled with that. And specifically in the last 4 or 5 years. I'm getting emails from people that want to argue that somehow the Jews, that Israel is really, those aren't really the Jews. That Israel, well, the people that are in Israel really aren't the true Jews. And of course, if that's true, let's just follow this out. Then who are those people that have come from the four corners of the earth and reestablished in their land? And I guess God made a mistake, so we better clear them out so the real Jews can come back. I mean, the whole idea of that is it just kind of collapses of its own weight. And yet it's rearing its ugly head. I get emails from people who want to argue about this.
To me, those are the Jews, as prophesied. And Hitler knew they were the Jews.
Yeah, Hitler had no trouble.
Yeah, he identified them quickly as the 12 tribes, and he said, I'm going to wipe them all out. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad knows that they're the 12 tribes. He wants to wipe them all out. And as a matter of fact, the Sephardic and Ashkenazic communities have engaged in long-term DNA studies so that they can establish tribal DNA imprints. And they've pretty much identified all 12 tribes now. And they know that those are the Jews.
And yet we see the vitriol from, you mentioned Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, but moving to Israel's southwestern border, we see Egypt with the newly elected President Morsi, who just this week, once again, called the Jews the descendants of pigs and apes. And of course, this is on page 60 of some, the New York Times, where they don't talk about this. If the American people saw the vitriol and the hatred against Israel, they would rally. There was I just finished a presentation on anti-Semitism, and I show this fiery imam, Higazi, in Tahrir Square, yelling at the top of his lungs, "To Jerusalem we go, martyrs in the millions. To Jerusalem we go." And there's 1.5 million people in Tahrir Square in Egypt chanting that. Of all the things that the Egyptian people could do, you'd think they'd focus on better infrastructure, education, farming practices, cleaning up Cairo, so, for the tourists. No, they focus on, let's go to Jerusalem and die as martyrs. Let's kill as many Jews as we possibly can. There's a supernatural component to this, and we're seeing that supernatural component manifesting right now in the Middle East.
Well, Matthew 24 is actually directed toward the people of Jesus, the Jews. In fact, it talks about nation rising against nation. And when the Jews came back to the land in 1897 and following, roughly, we had World Wars I and II. Those wars basically established Israel as we know Israel today. And then Jesus refers to all of this in Matthew 24:8. He says, all of these are the beginning of sorrows. So we have seen the beginning of sorrows. And the thing that I wanted to get to here is the fact that Jesus in Matthew 24 refers to Judea. He says, let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Well, you know what Judea is? It's Israel. Let's face it, Judea and Samaria is the contested territory. The Palestinians want to make it a state right now, but Jesus referred to it as Judea.
And the Palestinians, very interesting, their logo for the Palestinians, the Palestinian state, it's the entire map of Israel. There is no two-state solution in the Palestinians' mindset. There's only one state, and that entire state of Israel has now become Palestine. So we keep hearing, land for peace, and the Israelis give the land like in Gaza, but there is no peace. And looking at Gaza, within less than 24 hours, as they were leaving the territory, the mortar shells began to come across the border.
Absolutely. And it's an astounding thing that there's a lack of reason today, in my opinion. There's a lack of economic reasoning. There's a lack of strategic reasoning. There's a lack of reasoning when it comes to the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Let's sort of move to a slightly different subject, though we're still in Matthew 24, because you and I have talked a lot about this. Matthew 24:36 says this, followed by Matthew 24:37. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Now, I don't know how many hours you've lectured on that verse. And you've taken that to its maximum extent. Until very recently, the last, say, a couple of decades, people glossed over that and said, as the days of Noah. Well, that means, it's getting ready to flood or whatever. But it means a lot more than that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. It's a key verse. When we think that out of all the Tanakh that Jesus could point to, out of all the scriptures in the Tanakh, the Old Testament, that he could point to signal would be the sign of his coming, he points to that. It's a huge scriptural flare going up in the air, as it were. It's like, wow, look at this. And it immediately begs the question, what differentiates the days of Noah from any other time? And in that passage a little further, they were eating and drinking. Well, who's the they? People go, that's human beings. No, it's not. Not in my opinion. That they, when we look at the Genesis text, what do we see? The they refers to the sons of God, the B'nai Ha Elohim, the sons of God, the fallen angels who have come to earth, had sex with the women, and created this abominable hybrid known as the Nephilim. And that's, when we really start to get our heads around that, it is absolutely mind-blowing, because Jesus essentially is telling us that the fallen ones, once again, will somehow come to earth and do the same type of shenanigans that they did way back in Genesis 6.
Now, let me stop you right there. And to you who are listening, and there may be some of you right now who are saying, wait a minute, that's too much for me. That's way too much for me. They don't teach that at my church.
Yeah.
I've never heard this before. In fact, if I go back to Genesis 6, it talks about sons of God coming into the daughters of men. And I'm taught, you may say, that these are the sons of Seth who are marrying the daughters of men and creating a new race. Where do you get off, L.A., and I'm going to challenge you here for the sake of those listening, saying that those are fallen angels coming down and marrying the daughters of men?
We know that Scripture is best interprets itself. So the key phrase, B'nai Ha Elohim, that's the key phrase. Who really were the sons of God? Where else in the Bible is that phrase used? When we turn to the book of Job, we see it 3 times mentioned. I don't have chapter and verse memorized, but it's there 3 different times in the book of Job where that same phrase, sons of God, is used. And it always refers to the angels. Now, it doesn't denote whether they're fallen or good, but it's always the sons of God, B'nai Ha Elohim, are always referred to as angels. And obviously, in this case, when we go to Jude, the angels who left their first estate, right? What is he talking about there? Jude, in my opinion, is pointing back to Genesis 6. And it's a huge warning to us because it sort of sets up the protocols of the last days, that the prince of the power of the air will somehow begin to manifest in ways that we have not seen on the earth overtly in the last days. I believe that we're in the window of time where we're starting to see that happen.
Now, Jude, and you just mentioned Jude, I've got my Bible open here to Jude 6, and Jude is writing an epistle on false teachers. And he inserts a reference to these fallen angels under the heading of false teachers. He says, and the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness, under the judgment of the great day. Of course, that would be the tribulation. But he says they kept not their first estate, they left their own habitation. Now, let's talk about that just a bit. This is all under the heading of false teachers. What were they teaching? That is, what were they doing? What were they? What kind of a message did they bring when they came down to man?
Well, it's interesting, and unfortunately, the Bible really doesn't get into that per se, but the book of Enoch does. And the book of Enoch, while some people will dispute that and say, well, we shouldn't be reading the book of Enoch, Enoch is quoted 70 times in the Tanakh. It's also referred to specifically in Jude. It's quoted, an entire paragraph is quoted in Jude. I believe 2 Peter, and Paul alludes to it in 1 Corinthians, where he talks about women covering their hair because of the angels. What angels is he referring to? It goes back into the book of Enoch. Widely read, church fathers widely read it, found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The fallen angels, when they came, there was like a quid pro quo. They were giving the secrets of heaven to mankind. One of the most heinous secrets, which is profound, I believe the first abortion was given in that time period when the angels showed, and it says very specifically, how to kill the embryo in the womb. That's found in the book of Enoch. That's unbelievable.
Wow. By the way, the book of Enoch we don't regard as canonized scripture, but on the other hand, it's quoted in the Bible.
Yes. And
it's heavily quoted by the Jews themselves, the sages of Israel, back in the days of Jesus.
We certainly can look at it as a reference point.
Yeah.
As an amplification of the Genesis 6 story.
And the fact is that Enoch's book opens with a reference to the Great Tribulation, which is amazing. The oldest book talks about something that's still future to us, the Great Tribulation. Well, let's go back then and look at this. As the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. And Jesus, to me, is very clearly saying that the conditions on earth at his second coming will be very much the way they were in the days of Noah. What were conditions like in the days of Noah? Can you kind of visualize what it must have been like?
I think we were seeing open hybrids were walking around. The Nephilim obviously were there. But we also see, and Book of Enoch tells us this, that the angels sinned against the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. There was a lot of genetic experimentation going on. We get Greek mythos with centaurs and minotaurs and fawns and all this. And we're seeing this where you say, well, just because you quote the Katy Perry video where at the end she disrobes and we see that she has the legs of the fawn. She really isn't a fawn. Okay, I get that. She's not a real fawn, but why is that imagery there in a music video? What signal are they trying to send? She's from the waist up, she's human, but from the waist down, she has the legs of a fawn. And, of course, that ties back in the Greek mythos, which then further goes back to Genesis.
Yeah, and you're talking about a very popular rock video.
Yeah, millions of people have watched this.
So I suppose anybody under 20 today would know who Katy Perry is.
Pretty much.
For sure.
Under 30 for sure.
Under
Absolutely.
30 for So it's as though this generation is being prepared for something.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see in the kids' cartoons? You see half animal, half human. You see little creatures with rabbit, humans with rabbit ears.
Mm-hmm. And it's all okay.
And it's all okay. You see in the Disney cartoons all kinds of human-animal combinations. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that's been true of the Disney cartoons going all the way back to the 30s. That was one of their top messages. The little boys, in the Pinocchio feature film, the Walt Disney Studios did way back before World War II, featured bad little boys who slowly turned into donkeys. Right. They would pop ears, and then their noses would turn into donkeys. And there was this horrific idea of human-animal integration, which it was being prepared, I think, to subtly propagandize coming generations.
We have a story, I think it was last summer. It was on the Drudge Report, and I just love these headlines. It goes, Britain destroys 150 chimeras grown in labs. Okay, so they were growing chimeras. I mean, they used the word chimera. What were they? They were half animal? Were they, heads of goats? Who knows what they were? But they were chimeras. Well, the 150 we're told were destroyed, but what about the 150 that weren't destroyed? I mean, they make a big deal of telling, oh, thank God they did that. Well, do we really believe that scientists who are operating under a Darwinian paradigm, and there is no God in that paradigm, what do they care? There are no morals, there are no ethics, there's nothing. So I have a sneaky suspicion that some of these chimeras are being brought to fruition.
And a chimera, by the way, in case you're not familiar with that word, is a combination of two animal forms into one being. And when you look at Egypt, and when you look at Babylon,
sure,
you see all kinds of examples of
winged lions.
Yeah, the winged lions and so forth, or the man with the head of an ibis and the body of a man, the god Thoth or Tot, and he was supposed to signify great intelligence. With a bird head, I don't know how that works. But anyway, the Egyptians loved chimeras, and they worshipped them. And all of this came out of the invasion of planet Earth. Now, coming into the 21st century, the invasion of planet Earth is a great big sci-fi theme that you see as you see it replayed a dozen different ways.
Sure.
And this invasion is usually accomplished by creatures that you really wouldn't want to meet anywhere. If you were not well armed. And they are usually monsters of some sort in the sense that they seem to be combinations of various kinds of creatures. So we are being prepared, I think, almost indoctrinated, particularly the generation coming up now, to receive this stuff.
There's a term I coined back in Nephilim trilogy from the second book, The Unholy Deception, and that term is the coming great deception. And it's also the subtitle for Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, the coming great deception of a Luciferian endgame. We know that there's going to be a one-world government. We're told that in Scripture and prophecy. We're also told a one-world religious system. And what Darwinism has done is basically cut Christianity off at the knees. And now that paradigm of Darwinism is used and taught in academia and all the schools. That's it. That's the paradigm in which the world really embraces. And if you're foolish enough to believe in a God that created something, well, you're just an ignoramus. And so this sets up the coming great deception, as we see in movies like Prometheus, where this guy goes out into space. He's a trillionaire looking for his progenitors, looking for his creators. And as he gets there, he's looking for E.T. When Ben Stein in his movie Expelled sits down with Richard Dawkins and poses a simple question, where did life begin? Dawkins has no answer. Well, no one really knows. But then he's sort of thrown a lifeline by Stein, and he comes up with the idea that, well, maybe millions of years ago in another part of the galaxy, a race of aliens, extraterrestrials, who themselves would have had to arrive at this advanced state of intelligence by some sort of Darwinian means of evolution, created us and then spread us, seeded us through the galaxy. That's called panspermia. So here's the scenario, and I've written about this and lecture about it constantly. We are now wired up on this planet. We are, because of the internet. What happens in Japan, we see live here. What happens in Israel, we know about it almost instantaneously. Same thing in the Middle East. When the Middle East war erupts, and whichever prophecy that is, Psalm 83, Ezekiel, whatever it is, the ruination of Damascus, the ruin of Damascus, Isaiah 17, if a nuke is used, if we see a nuclear bomb used anywhere on this planet in this day and age, in modernity, this will set off the greatest collective fear that human beings have ever experienced, and we will experience it together because of the internet. And that, in my opinion, is the perfect moment for our space brothers to show up with all the answers. They will tell us they've created us, they've genetically manipulated us, they started the world's religions, world civilizations. Now at this critical juncture in human history, they, E.T., are back to usher us into a time of peace, prosperity, and knowledge. They'll come bearing gifts, free energy, and perhaps that enigmatic mark of the beast that we're told, which might be a DNA enhancer, an upgrade, a DNA upgrade. That's
so Matthew 24 combines two major elements: Israel as a nation, combined with those wars and rumors of wars that bring Israel sort of back, along with, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of coming of the Son of Man. It's interesting that those two ideas meet in Matthew 24, because we're seeing, I think, both of them right now.
I agree.
And war in Israel seems imminent. I think it's only the hand of God that has stayed it so far.
I am amazed. I'm amazed every year that we don't see, the whole Middle East just erupt in this regional war against Israel. I am amazed that we have not seen it really.
We
really
have in Matthew 20, or not Matthew 24, in Zechariah 12, and I'm going to read a few verses here and let L.A. comment on them. Verse 2 of Zechariah 12 says, "Behold, I'll make Jerusalem a cup of trembling." Now the Hebrew says a cup of poison unto all people round about when they shall be in siege, both against Judah and against Jerusalem. Is that happening right now? he inquired.
Yeah, I mean, the big answer is a big yes. Jerusalem is in the newspapers every single day. This push-pull that we see with the Arabs and the Palestinians and the Islamists, with Hagazi, the fiery imam in Egypt, declaring Jerusalem will be our eternal capital of the newly created United Arab States, to push for the caliphate in that whole area of the world, the Middle East. And, of course, the Israelis are going, Netanyahu's going, no, Jerusalem will be the eternal capital of Israel. So we are literally at loggerheads here. We are in an impasse. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Jerusalem, go back 150 years ago, and no one cared about Jerusalem. I mean, It was a little dot on the map. Maybe some pilgrims went. I've got pictures from like the middle part of the 19th century, and the place is denuded. It's desolate. There's nothing going on there. Jerusalem is never mentioned in the Quran, and yet it's mentioned hundreds of times in our book, in the Bible. And now we see that Jerusalem is a cup of trembling. Everyone talks about it. All the heads of state. Jerusalem is in the news constantly. We're here. We're here.
Now, as you go on down into Zechariah, and this I'd like for you to comment on, because this sets a kind of a stage for the interpretation of prophecy. If you go down to verse 5, "And the governors of Judah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength, in the Lord of hosts their God, and in that day I will make the governors of Judah like a hearth of fire among the wood, and a torch of fire in a sheaf." Well, that's pretty clear language, L.A. To me. It's saying that the governors of Judah are going to fight off the enemies and become victors rather than vanquished. From a tiny little state of Israel surrounded by millions of Arabs, they're going to secure victory. And this phrase, the governors of Judah, actually uses the Hebrew word eluf, or elufim, to describe governor, and that is a term that's used by the IDF today.
Wow.
And it means lieutenant colonel, or yes, lieutenant colonel, I believe, in the IDF is called an aloof. And so you have what are apparently military leaders here securing a victory over their foes. Now, could this happen soon?
Well, Obama, a couple of days ago, mentioned, sort of threw something out about Israel and about the settlements, and Netanyahu slapped back and just said Israel knows how to take care of its own, basically. I know what's good for Israel, Netanyahu says. That's a quote. So we see that Israel will never be pushed back into the sea. They've been gathered back from the four corners of the earth, never again to be moved out of their land. And at some point in the near future, they will look on Messiah, whom they have pierced, and mourn for him as an only son.
You know, this tells us something that our common sense would say will never happen. If you just used your human reasoning, looked at the Middle East, there's no way Israel can win. No way in the world.
Yeah.
And yet every Bible verse says Israel's going to win.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Well, I hope you've enjoyed listening to L.A. A lot of people enjoyed listening to L.A. last summer at the Branson Conference. You spoke 5 times, I believe. and he will speak at the drop of a hat, and it's always something informative and interesting. Right here, I have one of the 8 DVD packages that constitute or comprise the entire Branson set of speakers. You know, we had 26 speakers at the Branson Conference last year. In L.A., it was phenomenal, wasn't it?
It was absolutely fantastic. Get up at 6, go to bed at midnight, do it all over again. Really fun.
And 58 messages, and we have 8 of these cases holding DVDs, as you see right here in a loose leaf fashion. These are very top quality loose leaf folders that are holding lecturers from all over the place. Doug Hamp, Doc Marquis. We have, well, who were some? Doug Woodward. We had
Rob Skiba.
And
Tom Horn.
Chuck Missler was there. And just on and on it goes. Top names from everywhere speaking on current events and Bible prophecy. And we'd like to make the Branson set available to you. These 8 cases, like the one I'm holding here, comprise the complete set. Yours for only $149.95 plus shipping and handling. And a lot of people have already ordered these. We're just kind of making them available to you now, just in case you haven't heard about them. So that's the Branson Conference, the entire conference, 26 speakers, 58 messages, $149.95 plus shipping and handling. Just ask for the Branson Conference package. L.A., where has the time gone?
Very quickly.
It always does.
Great to be here, Gary.
It's always good to talk to you. You know, I think we're there. We are poised, and I believe there's this sense that something's going to happen soon. So, as we always say, keep looking up, everybody. He's coming. Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported program made possible by our many friends around the world. Be sure you tune in every day for breaking news and our daily prophetic news updates at prophecyinthenews.com, or follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/prophecyinthenews.